Events that change our lives often come unexpectedly. I was inspired by a woman who was watching a campfire together, and my life took an unexpected turn with another woman who couldn't even set up a tent properly. My name is David, 30 years old, and currently unemployed. I just left the rescue team where I had worked for 12 years. I was camping alone to seek solace in nature and to think about my future. It was a so-called solo camping. Camping became my hobby since I had enjoyed the skills and training for outdoor living from my rescue team days. I used to enjoy solo camping on my days off even when I was with the rescue team. I liked to keep my gear to a minimum and enjoyed touring on my bike when I was alone. Camping gear these days was quite compact. Today, I swiftly set up camp and was soaking in the serene atmosphere of the mountains. Ah, this is bliss, I murmured to myself when I heard a rustling noise. Looking up, I saw a woman entering the campsite alone. I watched her for a while to see if she had company, but it seemed she was alone. That's unusual. There has been a huge camping boom lately. Solo camping for women wasn't uncommon. But that day was a weekday, and it was winter. I had expected to relax alone, but it seemed that plan was out the window. Since she was a woman, I figured she'd be scared if I approached her because I was just a man. I tried to show no sign of being present and continue enjoying the natural surroundings, but isn't she struggling a bit too much? Even though it was deep in the mountains, it was not particularly high altitude and was a mild area, so there was no snow this time of year. Still, solo camping in the winter was challenging for anyone. I assumed she was an experienced camper considering she came during this season, but it was taking her forever to set up her tent. I watched her discreetly, and it seemed she was using her phone to follow a tutorial while setting up her gear. After struggling for 30 minutes, she finally set up a one-pole tent, but it was oddly slanted to one side. Is it crooked? She seemed to notice something amiss and murmured, but oh well, she says cheerfully, moving on to the next task. The forecast mentioned strong winds today. Her optimistic attitude worried me, and I repeated in my mind that this is not good at all. I checked her tent pegs. They were driven deep enough that it shouldn't blow away or collapse. Probably. Next, she seemed to be attaching a hammock to the trees. A hammock in winter, was that really necessary? She tied the rope to the tree while checking her phone and exclaimed, "Done," then immediately tried to get on it. I decided to step in at this point. Stop. It's dangerous. You'll fall. I tried not to raise my voice too much to avoid scaring her, but I did speak firmly to prevent her from climbing on. Ha! She flinched at my sudden intervention. I approached her while signaling with my hand. Sorry to startle you. I know it's sudden and surprising that a guy just appeared out of nowhere, but I couldn't just watch. Mind if I fix this? I said this as I began untying the hammock rope. Sure. She shrugged, so I introduced myself. I'm David, by the way. Former rescue team member. I'm quite used to this kind of stuff. When I introduced myself, the woman seemed to relax a bit. My background as a former rescue team member seemed to reassure her. My name's Emily. Sorry for the trouble, David. I noticed how incredibly beautiful she was. Her features were striking, with straight hair down to her shoulders. Though I couldn't see her figure well due to her layers, her legs and jeans were long and slender. I'm fairly tall, but she was tall for a woman too. I got a little nervous when I thought the woman was attractive. But since the woman was watching my hands with great interest, I decided to give a little lecture. After you pass the rope through this loop, pull it tight. It was pretty loose before. Give it a good tug. Emily hesitantly spoke up. I was worried about hurting the tree. Her concern was touching, and I couldn't help but smile. If you're worried about that, we can use some padding. A towel would work. I fetched a few towels I had and wrapped them around the tree, then tied the rope again, explaining each step. We finally got the hammock securely set up. Wow, amazing. Thank you so much. I quickly asked Emily, who was already swinging in the hammock. Can I fix the tent, too? It's a bit crooked. Her eyes lit up. Really? Please do. I noticed it was off, but after 30 minutes, I didn't have the energy to take it apart. She got out of the hammock, and I began showing her how to properly set up the tent. If all the pegs aren't evenly driven, it will lean. Start by getting the shape right, then make sure all the pegs are equally secure. I demonstrated by anchoring the tent's base to the ground. With her help, we soon had a perfectly pitched one-pole tent. Wow, it's a perfect triangle now. Thank you. I asked, waving my hand. No problem. Is this camping your first time in a while? It's almost my first time. I was surprised by the unexpected answer. Wait, your first time? Alone? In the winter? Isn't that a bit challenging? Why? She smiled wryly at my barrage of questions. I did some research with videos. I thought I'd be okay. If it gets tough, I can just ask the manager. But the admin building is far away. I bit back the urge to lecture her on the dangers of underestimating winter camping since I noticed the somber expression on her face. It's a memorial camp for my best friend, Jenna. Her sudden revelation chilled me. Emily's friend Jenna loved the outdoors and camped all year round. In contrast, Emily was an indoor person who often refused Jenna's camping invitations, citing bugs in the summer and the cold in the winter. Sometimes I agreed to go, but Jenna did most of the preparations. She made it look so easy, so I never thought I'd struggle this much. Emily scratched her head with a wry smile. These past few years, I've been so busy with work that I couldn't go camping with her much. I hadn't heard from her for a while, but I was too caught up with work to think much of it. When I got a call from Jenna's mom, I regretted not noticing anything sooner. I rushed to the hospital she mentioned and found a gaunt Jenna lying in bed. Emily's voice trembled. I panicked. You don't have to force yourself to talk about it. It's okay. I'm not the right person to hear this. I was on the verge of tears myself. Emily smiled as she saw me like this. You're kind, thank you. She didn't want me to see her like that, but her mom called me, and I'm glad I got to see her one last time. On that hospital bed, Jenna asked me to take her camping gear as a keepsake. I told her I couldn't use it. But she said she'd be happy just knowing her beloved gear was with me. She said if I kept it close, she'd probably be there with me too. I patted Emily's back as she sobbed and was looking at the one-pole tent. It was in excellent condition, though it was well used. She must have maintained it meticulously. Emily began to calm down as she gazed lovingly at the tent. After Jenna's funeral, some time passed, and I thought I'd give it a try, but I guess just diving in wasn't the best idea. She said this with a thin smile and her eyes red from crying. Jenna's dream was to create a campsite full of smiles. She always talked about it. I wanted to carry on that dream someday. But who knows how long it'll take at this rate. Her resigned tone pulled at my heartstrings. I seemed to be highly empathetic. Emily's pain from losing her irreplaceable friend and her frustration at not being able to fulfill her friend's dream mixed together in my heart. And it made me feel down. Emily noticed this and forced a bright smile. Sorry for the downer. How about I make some coffee? I decided to help her with the campfire instead of telling her I might be quicker on my own. You know, I have a favorite mug. Emily rummaged through her backpack and said, "Ta-da!" And she held out a stainless steel mug in front of me. I was taken aback. This logo. Emily beamed when I asked in a daze, cute, right? Jenna designed it. She made these camping stickers and had the same logo engraved on this mug. I staggered to my feet. I went to my bike parked at the campsite entrance and pulled out my helmet. When I showed it to Emily, her eyes widened in shock. That sticker. On the side of my helmet was the same logo as on her mug. I got this camping sticker during a similar winter camping trip. At the time, I was contemplating quitting the rescue team. I was advised to join the rescue team because of my large build, physical strength, and endurance in high school. The thought of working on site during disasters fascinated me. I had volunteered briefly during a local disaster in high school and helped with debris removal, and had seen rescue teams in action. Their coordinated efforts and efficiency left a strong impression on me. Could I become one of those rescue workers? There was the possibility of becoming what I admired. I was strongly drawn to a career in the rescue team, something I hadn't considered before. And so, I joined the rescue team. The training was tough, but I had no trouble with the physical demands. The joy of seeing someone rescued after hours of effort was indescribable. But the pain of lost lives was equally intense. And over time, the pain began to outweigh the joy. The hierarchy within the team was strict. Reprimands from superiors were a daily occurrence. I understood it was for the purpose of training and discipline. I accepted it as my responsibility and endured it when I was scolded. But it became unbearable to see others being reprimanded as if their pain were my own. It calmed me when I went camping on my days off, but after a day at the rescue team seeing others being reprimanded, my heart would feel heavy again. Living through such days, I was feeling pretty down at the time. That day, I visited a campsite to soothe my week's weary soul as usual. The manager invited me to join a big campfire they were having. Watching the flickering flames made me feel inexplicably at peace. I joined the campfire to see the large flames. While sipping hot wine and staring blankly, tears unexpectedly rolled down my cheeks. As I hurried to wipe them away, a woman sat down next to me. "What's wrong?" I looked up to see a woman with short hair and big eyes trying to look into my face. I brushed it off and said it was nothing, but she replied, "I'm just a stranger you'll never see again. Sharing might make you feel better." So, I talked about what was on my mind. She sighed and said sharply after listening to everything, "You're too kind. You probably have strong empathy." I know someone like that. They get sick or have headaches in noisy places or when they see someone being yelled at. Do you feel that way too? Her words made me realize something. I'd been experiencing frequent severe headaches those days. They always came when I was emotionally exhausted. I knew it. I think you'd be better suited to a job where you can be close to nature, animals, or even people. Her words struck a chord with me, but it is difficult to quit the rescue team. We need an approval from our superior. I may not be able to be approved with this kind of reason. When I showed signs of weakness, the woman rummaged through her bag and said, "Here, take this," as she handed me a sticker. It was a cute illustration of a girl raising her fist. That's my original camping sticker. Campers make and trade these. Mine represents a determination to visit many campsites. But after listening to everything, it's a fist of courage for you. Be brave. It's your life. She smiled as she said that. I felt like the cute girl in the illustration was giving me courage. Emily listened to my story with tears in her eyes. We didn't exchange contact info, so that was it. It took me a year to gather the courage, but this sticker gave me the strength to quit. As I spoke, Emily said, touching the sticker, "Jenna, she always gave courage to everyone, no matter what." When I said I couldn't bear her being gone, she told me, "I'll always be with you." This sticker is me. Whenever something happens, this sticker will always encourage you. Another tear rolled down Emily's cheek. Then she looked at me with determination. "Hey, would you run a campsite with me?" She had seemed to give up on running the campground earlier. When the topic came up again, I was surprised. "Weren't you giving up on that?" She nodded once. Then she looked at me directly again. "After hearing your story, I can't give up. Don't you think it's fate? That Jenna brought us together?" Her words left me speechless. "I feel like I can do it if you're with me, David." I furrowed my brows. Though I'm using it now, do campsites even make money? Today, I only paid $10 for this free site, plus $5 for firewood. Emily thumped her chest. "Leave it to me. I'm a freelance web designer. I can work from anywhere, and I'm quite successful. I have savings. And I think my freelance income can cover your salary while we manage the campsite." She said something incredible. "No way, I can't let a woman pay my salary." She frowned. "I'm the boss, and you're the employee. It's normal for me to pay you. It doesn't matter where the money comes from, right?" That made sense. Emily smiled slyly. "Of course, you'll be working hard. How about a campsite with an instructor for beginners like me? Wouldn't that be great?" It seemed she already had ideas in mind. Beginner plans, river fishing plans, rope work plans, and family plans. We'll create all sorts of plans. And you'll be the instructor for all of them. Hearing her ideas, one popped into my head as well. I wanted to teach children how to play in the mountains with the family plan. Emily laughed, seeing my enthusiasm. I'll handle the indoor tasks, and you'll take care of the outdoor work. Let's make Jenna's dream come true together. At that point, I decided to go for it. Jenna gave me courage. Let's fulfill the dream she couldn't. We took our first steps towards what seemed like a fantasy. I still wasn't sure if it would come true, and I was torn about how seriously to take this new endeavor. But 2 days after parting ways with Emily at the campsite, she contacted me about a mountain she was thinking of buying and asked for my opinion on its location and other aspects. Isn't she moving a bit too fast? The place she found had well-maintained surrounding roads and made it accessible by car or bike. There was a small but beautiful river, and it was wonderfully quiet once we stepped into the mountain. Though it could only be reached by car, we could offer a shuttle service for a few people. There was also a nearby national park that could offer potential partnerships. Apparently, Emily had been gathering information about campsites whenever Jenna talked about her dreams. How did you find such a great spot so easily? I was impressed and asked, and Emily had a big smile. From now on, the main maintenance is up to you. I quit looking for a new job. I resolved to devote myself to this campsite. A year later, it was the day before the campsite's grand opening. Emily's efforts since then have been incredible. Only the required permits and applications were enormous. It took a particularly long time to get permission to cut down some trees. Once everything was in place and we got the green light, it was my turn. I had obtained all the necessary licenses when I was waiting for various approvals, so it was challenging but smooth. We finally completed our campsite thanks to the help of friends and sometimes relying on contractors. Though it only had free sites, we separated areas for families, solo campers, and groups based on their purpose. Most camping equipment including tents could be rented if reserved in advance, though availability of tents was limited. We minimized the use of electricity because we wanted everyone to enjoy nature as much as possible. Instead, we offered support for any inconveniences. Emily and I made and drank hot wine sitting around a small campfire in the middle of the small site. It's delicious. She smiled at me with a relieved expression. This campsite turned out so beautifully. I thought making a campsite was just a dream. I'm really glad to meet you, David. Thank you. She smiled warmly. I straightened up. I'm glad I met you that day too, Emily. And meeting Jenna. I'm grateful. Her courage helped me quit, and your guidance led me to my new job. I was struggling. The rescue team work was fulfilling, and I still admired it. I was searching for something I could do next. Something where I could use the skills I developed in the rescue team. The opportunity to run a campsite seemed like a godsend. I never imagined I'd be running a campsite. Emily smiled at my words. Right. Neither of us ever thought we'd be running a campsite. And yet, we've made it happen. Isn't that amazing? I nodded. And thanks to your incredible promotion efforts, tomorrow's going to be busy. I wonder if I can handle it all. We had a packed schedule. The beginner plans and family plans got very popular, and there were many reservations for the campfire plan. So we planned to build a large campfire with everyone tomorrow. You can do it, David. Emily's cheeks were slightly flushed from the hot wine and the fire, and she looked at me with dreamy eyes. My heart skipped a beat at her gaze. Tomorrow would be extremely busy. It would be best to get some sleep early, and it might be wise to keep our relationship professional. Though I intended to keep things professional, my mouth moved on its own. Emily. I like you. I uttered a single word softly. I mumbled as feeling drowsy. Emily looked slightly confused. You like me? Isn't it Jenna? The mention of Jenna surprised me too. Jenna? Why? Emily looked up slightly. She seemed to be thinking. Was she already drunk? Well, you said Jenna gave you courage, right? You cherished the sticker on your helmet, supported her dream, and worked hard to build this campsite. Isn't that for her? I shook my head vigorously. No. Well, yes, but no. I was chasing your dream, Emily. She widened her eyes in surprise. Really? Not for Jenna? But for me? Of course. I didn't even exchange contact info with Jenna. Sure, she gave me courage, but I did all this for you. But you said we should fulfill Jenna's dream. For Jenna. That's because you said it first. I was just following your lead. Indeed, we both said we wanted to fulfill Jenna's dream when we talked about building the campsite. But this misunderstanding was too much. Our voices echoed through the quiet mountains. After arguing for a while, silence fell, and Emily started to cry. As I scrambled to comfort her, she said, I always thought it was for Jenna. That was fine since I love Jenna, too. But actually, I've hoped you'd see me too. I felt like collapsing in exhaustion. Instead, I hugged her. I've always liked you, Emily. I ran headlong into this project because you wanted to make Jenna's dream come true. Now, please listen to my wish too. She nodded while trembling in my arms. I'm so happy. I've always liked you too, David. We were under the star-filled sky with the crackling of a small campfire and the crisp mountain air. The next day, our new campground was set to open. It was at this place that Emily and I finally came together. And a few years later. Okay, I'll hand out the bingo cards. I pulled out bingo cards for a nature game as part of the family plan. Can you find the items listed? Green things, black things, things that smell nice, let's find them and complete 3 rows of bingo. My son Jake interrupted as I was explaining the game. He insisted on joining, so I got permission from the family and let him join in. Just then, Emily walked over with a few women. David, I'm off to the trekking tour. Can you take care of the main office? Surprised at how quickly time passed, I agreed. Got it. Be careful. I added a rule limiting the bingo game area to the family site visible from the main office and shouted, Ready, go. The kids ran off with smiles on their faces. I briefly followed Emily with my eyes watching the family before moving closer to the office. Emily used to be quite the indoor type. But now she has been captivated by the flowers and birds that adorn the place ever since she started running the campground. She even organizes trekking tours and guides them whenever there are reservations. Emily's beginner-friendly courses are popular among women who aren't very confident in their stamina since she was originally an indoor person. Though I mainly manage the campsite, I volunteered whenever disasters struck, thanks to the confidence gained from my rescue team days. Joining the rescue team and working there had been a source of pride. I deeply respect the rescue workers who dedicate themselves to serving the country and its people. The skills and strength I developed in the rescue team, such as debris removal, are now used to help disaster-stricken areas. My wife Emily and our child support my activity wholeheartedly. When I need to go, Emily adjusts the reservation numbers, calls on friends for help, or modifies plans to accommodate the situation. Our guests are always understanding, though these changes are sudden. My eyes fall on a sticker inside the main building. Campers add their stickers, but there's a special place for Jenna's sticker. Emily replaces it whenever it fades. I silently addressed the sticker. Jenna. Thanks to you, I've met my beloved wife, our child, and seen so many smiles at this campsite. Thank you for giving me the courage. Lost in thought, I noticed a car pulling into the parking lot. It's time to welcome the next guests. Look. I found something yellow, a dandelion. Just one more for bingo. I walked toward the main building with the sound of children enjoying the field bingo in the background. The day of the business meeting had arrived. Hi, I'm Julia from DRS Factory. Is John available? We have a meeting scheduled today. As I was returning to my office from an errand, I heard a woman's voice as I passed by the front desk. Instinctively, I turned around. There stood a woman with smooth skin, chestnut-colored long hair, and a great figure. I had spoken to her on the phone yesterday, but seeing her in person, I couldn't help but stare. This must be Julia, the representative. Julia noticed my gaze and looked at me with a slightly puzzled expression. Oh, nice to meet you. I'm John, the person in charge. Thank you for coming today. This way, please. I hurriedly said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the nerves. Oh, so you're John. Nice to meet you, I'm Julia. I'm looking forward to our meeting today. Julia replied, looking straight into my eyes. Her large, bright eyes and well-defined features. There was no doubt she was a beauty. My heart raced and I felt embarrassed. I tried to look away from her face, but then thought, wait, she looks familiar. And found myself staring at her again. Then, at what an unlucky timing, our CEO, Mr. Smith, walked by at just such a moment. Whoa, you're staring too much, just because your business partner was a very beautiful woman. Mr. Smith joked, catching me off guard. I felt even more embarrassed and looked down, avoiding Julia's eyes. Mr. Smith then said, oh, and started walking toward Julia and me. My name is John. I work at a company that designs packaging for products sold on the market. I'm a 30-year-old single man. John. I heard you lost a new client contract recently. This is why we can't trust a low-educated like you with important work. You can only clean, serve coffee, and photocopy documents, so hurry up and make me a cup of coffee. The stronger the better. Since this morning, my boss, Robert, had been shouting at me. Robert is notorious for being mean to his subordinates and especially looks down on those with less education. As a high school graduate, I often bear the brunt of his harsh words. Robert didn't have to say it like that. Don't worry about it, John. And it wasn't your fault the new contract fell through. You did great bringing in a new client. The one who ruined it was none other than Robert. He was disliked by Mr. Davis. Since Mr. Davis is the president of the client company, that's why we lost the contract. I'll talk to him about this later. My senior colleague, Thomas, encouraged me. Thomas always helped me out when Robert gave me a hard time. Robert constantly berated me, calling me incompetent. Even when I successfully brought in new clients or secured meetings, he would find some excuse to reassign me to menial tasks. Once again, Robert singled me out and dumped more menial work on me. Thomas always backed me up, somehow managing to get me assigned to client accounts again. But it was a never-ending cycle of being demoted to menial tasks by Robert. As long as Robert is my boss, there's no hope for my promotion. I'll be stuck as an entry-level employee, unable to escape menial tasks. John, can I talk to you for a moment? One day, Thomas called me over. The other day, your junior, Alex, did some cold calling at a cosmetics company called DRS Factory. They're interested in doing business with us. So we need someone skilled to handle the negotiations. Since Alex is still inexperienced, John, we want you to take on this responsibility. I was surprised. Are you sure it's okay for me to handle such an important meeting? I haven't been in charge of any clients recently because, well, Robert reassigned me. I don't have much experience and lack confidence. I replied, feeling hesitant. Thomas smiled and said, don't underestimate yourself. I remember when you secured a contract with a new client before, you have great sales skills. The feedback from clients you've handled has been positive. Believe in yourself. I've already convinced Robert to let you handle this. So you won't be reassigned. I'm counting on you. With that, Thomas smiled and said, I have an errand to run now, so I'll be out for a while. And left. Left alone in the office, I felt a bit confused but decided not to waste the chance Thomas gave me. I got the details from Alex about DRS Factory and quickly scheduled a meeting for the next day. Okay, I'll do my best. I motivated myself, determined to make the most of this opportunity. But just as I was feeling good and confident, I ran into Robert in the hallway. Hey! Don't get cocky just because you got assigned a client. If you fail to secure this contract, you're fired, he snarled as he walked past. His constant negativity was disheartening, but I couldn't let it get to me. I refocused and prepared for the next day. And so, the day of the meeting arrived. Hi, I'm Julia from DRS Factory. Is John available? We have a meeting scheduled today. As I was returning to my office from an errand, I heard a woman's voice as I passed by the front desk. Instinctively, I turned around. There stood a woman with smooth skin, chestnut-colored long hair, a fair complexion, and a great figure. I had spoken to her on the phone yesterday, but seeing her in person, I couldn't help but stare. She noticed my gaze and looked at me with a slightly curious face. "Oh, nice to meet you. I'm John, the person in charge. Thank you for coming today. This way, please," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite my nerves. "Oh, so you're John. Nice to meet you, I'm Julia. I'm looking forward to our meeting today," Julia replied, looking straight into my eyes. Her large, bright eyes and well-defined features. She was undeniably beautiful. My heart raced and I felt embarrassed. I tried to look away from her face but then thought, she looks familiar. And found myself staring again. Just then, as if on cue, our CEO, Mr. Smith, walked by. "Whoa, you're staring too much just because your business partner was a very beautiful woman," Mr. Smith joked, catching me off guard. I felt even more embarrassed and looked down, avoiding Julia's eyes. Mr. Smith then said, "Oh," and started walking toward Julia and me. "Julia, is that really you? You've grown so much. How old are you now? You've become quite a beauty," he said. I was confused by the situation. "Uncle Ted, I can't believe I'm running into you here. I'm 28 now. I had no idea K&DO Corporation was your company. I had heard of a design firm but didn't know it was yours," Julia exclaimed, addressing Mr. Smith. "Uncle." Noticing my confusion, Mr. Smith explained. "Sorry about that. She is my niece, my sister's daughter, so we have different last names. I haven't seen her since she was in middle school, about 15 years ago. It's quite a surprise to see her all grown up." Mr. Smith laughed heartily. Seeing him laugh and looking at Julia, I understood. When I first saw Julia and thought she looked familiar, it was because she was Mr. Smith's niece. It's not unusual for an uncle and niece to resemble each other. I see. When I first met Julia, I thought she looked familiar. I never imagined it was because she resembles you, Mr. Smith, I said honestly. Julia laughed. "Really? Do I really look like Uncle Ted?" "It's the first time I've heard that." Mr. Smith chuckled. "I was quite the handsome guy in my younger days, so she must take after me." His good-natured humor lightened the mood. "Well, I'll leave the meeting to you. Even though she's my niece, make sure to prioritize our company's interests, right, John?" Mr. Smith said, patting my shoulder before heading to his office upstairs. I recomposed myself and led Julia to the meeting room. "Sorry about the mix-up. Let's start fresh. Nice to meet you," Julia said, slightly embarrassed, handing me her business card, to which I responded with mine. That day, we reviewed samples and brochures of her company's cosmetics and discussed the possibility of my company handling their packaging design. The meeting went well, and Julia seemed even more interested in doing business with us, so we ended the day on a positive note, considering the contract favorably. A few days later, Julia came back for a second meeting. This time, the receptionist guided her to the meeting room, and I received an internal call to join her there. Julia had her hair tied back in a ponytail. She looked stunning. I almost said it out loud, but I kept it to myself, not wanting to sound weird. The second meeting also went smoothly, and it was nearly certain we'd finalize the contract. I mentally celebrated my success. "Well, I'll confirm the delivery schedule and get back to you," I said, concluding the meeting. Julia then said, "This is unrelated, but after we first met, I told my mom about you. When I mentioned that we were meeting at Ted's company, she asked about you and recognized your name from your business card. I was surprised." "Your mother knows me?" I asked. Not understanding the situation, Julia explained, "Yes, she saw your name and said, 'Isn't that Johnny?' I was flustered. She called me Johnny. Does that mean she knew me from my childhood? John, did you know Uncle Ted's family when you were a kid?" "Oh, I mean, Mr. Smith, sorry for calling him that," Julia said, looking a bit embarrassed. "Sorry about that. Yes, I did know the Smith family when I was a child." However, I don't remember meeting Mr. Smith's sister, your mother. I apologize for that. I apologized in return. I'm sorry as well. Julia quickly followed up, no. It's perfectly normal to forget the adults you met as a child. Taking advantage of this topic, I shared a bit about my childhood with Julia. For me, Mr. Smith was originally my classmate's father. The Smith family and my family were neighbors, and Mr. Smith's eldest son, James, and I were classmates and good friends. My mother and James's mother, Mr. Smith's wife, were also good friends. My father passed away from an illness when I was young, so it was just my mother and me. The Smith family often looked out for us, inviting us to barbecues and outings. We had a close relationship. As I explained this, Julia added, my mother mentioned that she often saw you at the Smith house when she visited Uncle Ted. She remembered you playing with James. She even talked with your mother a few times. I apologize for not remembering your mother from back then. I was so focused on playing with James and the other kids, I said. Amazed by the coincidence. I then told Julia about how my relationship with the Smith family changed during and after middle school. As you might know, James went to study abroad in Italy during middle school. He loved it there and has been living in Italy ever since. Mr. Smith and his wife supported his decision and funded his stay. Now that he's an adult, he's running his own business there and doing well. Julia's eyes lit up. Yes, my mom told me about James. It's amazing that he's doing so well in Italy. I really respect him for that. However, she seemed to notice my slight change in expression. Is there something you're not telling me? She asked. I hesitated but decided to share. Well, since it's a family matter, I'm not sure if I should be the one to talk about it. However, Mr. Smith has been a huge help in my life, and I feel it's important to be open. I continued, when James went abroad, Mr. Smith was quite lonely. He used to teach us how to split wood, start fires, and do DIY projects. He enjoyed sharing these experiences with us. Since I lost my father when I was young, Mr. Smith became a father figure to me. After James left, Mr. Smith paid even more attention to me. During my teenage years, I drifted away due to typical teenage issues. But when I struggled to find stable employment after high school, Mr. Smith offered me a job here. That was when I was 25. Julia listened attentively, nodding. She then said, I'm so glad you were there for Uncle Ted. I didn't know all this, but I'm grateful you shared it. It's amazing to have such a connection with a business partner. I'm really happy we met. I was so flattered by her words that I felt my face turning red. Actually, I was probably already blushing. Trying to stay professional, I replied, I'm sorry for sharing so much personal history. I'll follow up with you about the delivery schedule soon. Julia responded formally, I look forward to it. We both left the meeting room, and as we did, we ran into Robert. He glared at Julia and me. Julia, unaware that Robert was my boss, politely greeted him. Robert responded, Are you John's client? Nice to meet you too, and handed Julia his business card. I'm sorry you have to deal with someone as incompetent as John. If there are any issues, please contact me directly. I don't know why Mr. Smith keeps someone with such a low education level in our company, he muttered. Julia reluctantly gave him her business card in return. After Robert walked away, Julia said, That man, he said he's a manager? He seemed very unpleasant. Are you okay? I reassured her, Oh, I'm used to it. He always looks down on me, but it's fine. I escorted her to the exit, saying, I'll be in touch about the delivery schedule. The next day, our contract with DRS Factory was officially finalized, and I passed the project to the design team. I felt a bit sad that I wouldn't be in contact with Julia until the delivery date, but was thrilled the deal went through. I was grateful for Julia being such a good person and the unexpected connection we had. Thanks to Thomas, I also got more responsibilities with new clients, keeping me busy. 1 week later, I was suddenly called to meet with Mark, Robert's superior. Have I done something wrong? I anxiously approached Mark's desk. Sorry to call you out of the blue. We've had some sudden personnel changes. Mark said. I see. A personnel change? My heart pounded as I wondered where I might be reassigned. Yes. Dismissal effective today. Mark said bluntly. What? I was shocked and felt like my heart would leap out of my chest. Dismissal effective today? I repeated his words in disbelief. Yes. Mark confirmed. I mustered the courage to ask, was there a complaint? As I said that, a thought struck me. Could it be that I made a mistake by talking about my childhood and family with Julia during the business meeting? But Julia didn't seem upset, and the meeting ended on a positive note. Wait a minute. I ran into Robert right after the meeting with Julia. He must have reported something negative about me to the higher-ups. That must be it. These thoughts raced through my mind. Well, something like that. Mark responded. He then continued, so Robert will be replaced by Thomas, who will be promoted to manager. And as for the assistant manager position, we think you're the right person for it. What? My exclamation came out in a strange pitch again. I couldn't grasp the situation. I'm being fired, yet I'm the right person for a promotion? Wait, am I being fired or promoted? When I said that, Mark looked puzzled and replied, what? Then he started chuckling. Sorry. I completely left out the subject. I'm a terrible boss. My apologies. The one being fired is Robert. Robert is out. Thomas is the new manager, and you are being promoted to assistant manager. I was stunned. Me, an assistant manager. That's right. Can I count on you? Actually, it's already decided, so do your best. Mark said with a grin. I was taken aback by the sudden promotion and Robert's dismissal. As I returned to my desk in a daze, Thomas was waiting for me. John, congratulations on your promotion. Well, for both of us. Let's do our best together. Thomas, now the new manager, put his arm around my shoulder. Yes. I'll do my best. I was thrilled that Thomas, a senior I respected, would be replacing Robert. But why did this sudden change happen? I asked Thomas. Do you know why Robert was fired? Thomas replied, I'm not sure about all the details, but Mark mentioned that Mr. Smith suddenly decided Robert couldn't be trusted anymore. Robert's bad attitude and behavior probably caught up with him. I had no way of knowing the full story. But it was a relief not to deal with Robert's constant negativity anymore. The entire office seemed to breathe a sigh of relief without Robert's toxic presence. About 6 months passed. I found fulfillment in my new role as assistant manager. The collaboration with Thomas was going well, leading to improved company performance. Our deal with DRS Factory, the first project I managed, was a success. They were impressed with our design work and wanted to continue working with us, increasing the volume of business. With my promotion, the responsibility for DRS Factory was handed over to my junior, Alex, which meant I no longer interacted directly with Julia. One day, as I was finishing work and leaving the office, I saw Mr. Smith coming down from the upper floor, talking to someone. I greeted him, good evening, and was about to exit the building when he called out, John. When I turned, the man next to Mr. Smith looked at me with wide eyes and said, John. Is that really you? It's been so long. The tall man with a slight tan sparked a flood of memories. It was James, Mr. Smith's eldest son. I immediately recognized his familiar features. James. You're back from Italy? I was thrilled. We hadn't seen each other since middle school, over 15 years ago. I had some downtime at work, so I came back for a short visit. I just landed at the airport, but since my dad's office is closer than home, I stopped by here first. James said. Your mom's been missing you more than I have, so you better head home soon. Mr. Smith said, pointing at his son, but his face showed how happy he was. He must have been delighted to see his son after such a long time. We're having a welcome home dinner for him tomorrow night at this restaurant. If you're free, join us, Mr. Smith said, handing me a flyer for a restaurant in a Manhattan high-rise. I'd love to. It sounds like a great chance to catch up with James. I was thrilled. Then, see you tomorrow, Mr. Smith said with a smile as he left with James. Feeling warm inside, I headed home. The next day, I went to the restaurant Mr. Smith mentioned and told the staff at the entrance that I was there for the Smith family. They led me to a large room labeled Smith family. Johnny. Long time no see. James's mother greeted me warmly as I entered. James, looking a bit embarrassed, said, "Honestly, this dinner is my mom's idea. I wish she wouldn't make such a big deal about my return." "Well, you left for Italy when you were 14. Everyone missed you, including me," I replied, chuckling. At the dinner were Mr. and Mrs. Smith, James's sister Lily, an older man who introduced himself as James's uncle, and a cousin around our age. I felt a bit out of place among the Smith family, but Mrs. Smith quickly reassured me, "Johnny, you're like family to us." "There's still my aunt and cousin to come," James told me. I thought about how James was so well loved by his relatives. Then it hit me. James's aunt and cousin. As soon as I murmured that, a woman's voice said, "Sorry we're late." I turned to see an older woman and a young woman entering the room. The younger woman and I locked eyes immediately. "John," she called out. It was Julia, the representative from DRS Factory. It had been 6 months since we last saw each other after I handed over the account. "Julia works with our company. John is our assistant manager, so they know each other from work," Mr. Smith quickly explained to everyone. Julia's mother greeted me, "You must be Johnny. Julia has told me about you. Thank you for all your help." I responded, "The pleasure is mine. Thank you for your support," handing her my business card. "Let's keep it casual tonight," Mr. Smith said. The dinner started, and we shared stories about Italy and caught up on what we missed. Julia often spoke to me, and we had a good conversation. Then I learned a surprising fact. I told Julia about how I became assistant manager after Robert was suddenly fired and that I had to hand over the DRS Factory account to Alex. Just then, Mr. Smith joined our conversation. Julia was furious that day. She called me, angry, after her meeting with John, saying she met Robert in the hallway and he was incredibly rude. She said, "How can you keep someone like him in charge? You need to rethink your priorities." She really gave me an earful. Mr. Smith said. Julia turned bright red. "Ted. I told you not to tell John that," she exclaimed. I was taken aback. So that's what happened. I can't believe it was thanks to Julia that Robert got fired. Thomas became the manager, the work environment improved, and everyone is now happier. Thank you so much. I thanked Julia sincerely. Julia's mother, Linda, chimed in, "Ted, are you just following Julia's orders? Is that really okay? Don't get the wrong idea." I was already considering what to do about Robert, but Julia's call pushed me to make the decision. It was my judgment in the end. Mr. Smith laughed. Regardless, I realized how much Julia had helped and how Mr. Smith valued us. On the way home, Julia asked for my personal contact information instead of my work details, and we exchanged numbers. Julia was a wonderful, attractive woman, and I was already drawn to her. When she reached out and asked me on a date, I was over the moon. And so, what started as a chance meeting turned into something much more meaningful. However, as an employee at Mr. Smith's company, I felt it was presumptuous and awkward to consider developing a romantic relationship with Julia. Especially since she was Mr. Smith's niece. Despite my reservations, Mr. Smith would frequently ask, "How are things going with Julia?" whenever he saw me at work. James also messaged me from Italy, saying, "If you and Julia get married, I'll be happy to be your relative." To top it all off, Julia's mother, Linda, told her, "Bring John over to our house. I'll cook for you both." Julia passed this on to me. With the Smith family's encouragement, my relationship with Julia blossomed into a romance, and 2 years later, we got married. My work was going well, and I was extremely happy. I heard through the grapevine that Robert was now working as an employee at one of our client companies. According to one of our employees who saw him, he had mellowed out and was quietly working hard. On weekends, my mother would often say, "Julia? I'm going shopping with Julia's mom. Do you want to come along?" "Yes. I'd love to." My wife, Julia, would happily join them. My mother and Julia's mother were originally good friends, and they were thrilled to become relatives through our marriage. The two moms and Julia often went shopping together. Life was peaceful and happy. Reflecting on it, I realized life is full of connections. I felt deeply grateful for the many wonderful connections in my life. Determined to give back to those around me, I focused on creating a workplace where my subordinates could find fulfillment and on building a happy home with my beloved wife. Don't bring your grandma just because you're single, laughed my boss, Steve, rudely. His behavior and words were incredibly offensive. Even when I or Steve's wife told him to stop, he just mocked, "Don't bring an old lady because you're single," laughing obnoxiously. I was thinking about how to respond to him. "Steve, what are you saying?" "What?" The executives rushed over, surrounding us. As I was confused, they must have sensed something was wrong. "Oh, Margaret, you came today." Michelle, the executive, smiled at my grandmother as she approached. At that moment, Steve's face turned pale. "I'm Alex, a single office worker. Since I was a child, my grandmother Margaret often told me, people are weak creatures, so they dislike those who are different from themselves. They criticize without recognizing or accepting them. But what's sadder is not being able to live your life because you're worried about those people." She spoke as if she had experienced it herself. As a child, I didn't fully understand. "You might not understand now, but when you grow up, you will," she said, patting my head. Indeed, back then, I didn't grasp the meaning of her words. "Just be yourself, Alex." "Okay, I got it." Not understanding fully, I just thought she meant to express my individuality. I thought this was what she wanted to say. "All right, let's start making dinner. I'll help too." My family consists of my father, my younger brother, my grandmother, and me. My mother passed away when I was in high school. "Live your life as your grandmother said. I'll be watching from heaven." She was ill. After her illness was discovered, she quickly left us for heaven despite our efforts. Even so, we had many talks during that short time. That's why I believe we were able to properly say goodbye at her funeral. "Don't worry. I will take good care of you." After my mother passed, my grandmother took over the household chores. My father runs his own business and doesn't have much time for housework. Therefore, my grandmother's presence is invaluable to my brother and me. "Why did you start your current job, Dad?" "I've always wanted to try it." Just like me, my father was also committed to doing what he wanted, following my grandmother's teachings. His business was something he had wanted to do since he was a child, and my grandmother never opposed it. Because of that, despite the challenges, he seemed to enjoy his work. However, right after my mother passed away, even my father was deeply depressed. "I'm thinking of closing down the business," he said. I didn't oppose his decision, and my brother just responded with, "Oh, really?" Only my grandmother took his words seriously. "If you won't regret closing the shop on a whim, then go ahead. But if even for a moment you hesitate, don't do it." She advised him this way. As a result, the shop continued to operate. Growing up in such a family, I tried various activities in college, including sports and extracurricular activities. "Alex, you always seem to be having fun." "Yeah. I participate in whatever interests me, so I get to experience many things. Thanks to this, I gained a lot of experience. After graduation, I joined a local trading company. It wasn't a major corporation, but it had significant influence in the area. I'll be myself at work too." I thought as I stepped into my new role, full of expectations. "Don't overdo it from the start. You're not great at reading the room," said my brother Matt, who had just started college. He, too, was studying hard to achieve his dreams. "Really?" "Yeah. You say what you think, but that can annoy people." I couldn't help but smile at his words. I do speak my mind. And it has caused trouble before, so I learned to be more reserved. "Don't worry. I've grown up too." I laughed, and Matt muttered, "We'll see." "Alex, how's work going?" "Thanks to everyone, I'm adjusting well." The company I joined had many talented employees. Each person's abilities were impressive, but more importantly, they were supportive. "That's good to hear. Let us know if you need anything. We're all here to help. Thank you. The way everyone supported and helped each other moved me deeply. When one person made a mistake, the team worked together to minimize the impact. Instead of just conforming, people frequently voiced their ideas and everyone took them seriously. Their desire to create good products and improve was evident. This environment allowed everyone to express themselves fully, making it a comfortable place for me. I felt like I could be myself and work effectively here. Hey, don't spoil the newbie. They won't grow if you do that. Steve. Even in such a supportive company, there were people I didn't get along with. Steve, the boss, was one of them. He was always high-handed with everyone. Come on, Steve. Supporting them helps them grow too. You're too lenient. That's why the younger generation is so weak. Steve was not only harsh to juniors but also to his superiors. Since the company values individuality, Steve's attitude is recognized as part of his character. However, many people around him find him difficult to deal with. Steve probably senses this too. You guys don't understand how much I voice my opinions for the company, he said, somewhat venting his frustration to the other employees. If he's aware, he should stop. But from his perspective, he expects everyone to adjust to him. I understand what you're saying, Steve. I'll try not to rely too much on others, I said, brushing off his comments. Nowadays, I handle things maturely, but there was a time when I was fed up with his attitude and confronted him. The trigger wasn't significant. Not being able to greet your superiors. What kind of upbringing did you have? He was displeased with how a newcomer greeted him. His reasoning was absurd. Even if we don't greet you first, as a subordinate, you must greet us loudly with gratitude, he said. Hearing that, I couldn't help but interject. Maybe it's because they don't have any gratitude to you, Steve? Don't get cheeky with me. In an instant, Steve flew into a rage and scolded me. Speaking up to me? You've gotten quite bold, he threatened. Things escalated quickly, becoming unmanageable. What's all the commotion about? Hearing the commotion, executive Michelle Brown came over and settled the situation. He probably didn't intend to face Michelle. Steve disappeared quickly. Alex, it's important to voice your opinions, but choose the right time. We have the anniversary party coming up. Making Steve angry doesn't benefit anyone. Michelle warned me as she saw Steve off. But if it gets too bad, she whispered with a smile. It's because of qualities like these that many of her subordinates admire her. I am one of them, and I felt grateful to work under her. Alex, you're still the same. My colleague Lisa said with a smile. She's also ambitious and actively takes on her work. Steve often criticizes her, saying, for a woman, you can't talk. Didn't you just tell Steve, what does being a woman have to do with it? Yeah, I did. She laughed, and I couldn't help but laugh with her. Seeing us, Michelle smiled. It's good to see you two getting along. How's work? My father asked when I got home. It's good. I enjoy it, and the company culture suits me. That's great. How's the shop? It's going well. I'm planning to start something new soon, he said with a joyful tone. Seeing him fully recovered from my mother's passing reassured me. Welcome home, Alex. Dinner will be ready soon. Thanks, Grandma. Where's Matt? He said he wants to finish studying first. I enjoyed a meal and a bath prepared by my grandmother and cherished the family time together. A few days later, the company held its anniversary party. It's nerve-wracking to have it in such a big hotel. It's customary for the anniversary party to be held in a grand hotel. Despite being only about half a century old, the company has grown significantly. And the party is popular because all attendees can eat and drink on the company's dime. Lots of people are here. Looks like Michelle's husband is here too. Employees can bring their spouses to the event. Sure enough, Michelle was enjoying the dinner with her dashing husband. Are you sure it's okay for me to be here? Of course. I don't have a girlfriend, and it's lonely to attend alone. Amidst the crowd, I attended with my grandmother. Unfortunately, I don't have a girlfriend. Many others brought their partners. Initially, I thought of coming alone, but I decided to bring my grandmother. You're important to me, Grandma. I owe who I am today entirely to my grandmother. I wanted to bring her to the ceremony to repay her for everything she has done for me. It's been a while since I've been to an event like this. It's a bit tiring, my grandmother said with a smile. Despite her words, she seemed to be enjoying herself. Well, it's a special occasion, so have fun. I responded with a smile. Hey, Alex. While I was chatting with my grandmother, someone approached us. It was Steve. Who's this, Alex? Your girlfriend? Steve, with a woman by his side, spoke with a drunken laugh. You like older women? Well, she's more of a grandma. Don't bring your grandma just because you're single. What are you saying? Stop it. Just because you're single doesn't mean you can bring an old lady here, said the woman next to him, who seemed to be his wife, pulling his arm. But he ignored her, smirking and looking back and forth between me and my grandmother. Though annoyed, I tried to stay calm and not ruin the atmosphere. This is my grandmother. She took care of me after my mother passed away, so I wanted her to enjoy tonight. Oh, you're from a single-parent family. How sad, probably didn't get much proper love. Grandma, you might have failed in raising him. This guy doesn't respect his elders, Steve said, peering into my grandmother's face and laughing. Just as I was about to retort. Steve. What are you saying? What? They must have been listening to our conversation nearby. The executives rushed in and surrounded us. Both Steve and I were taken aback. The executives were urging Steve to apologize, telling him, take back what you just said, and she is. What's going on? Michelle, noticing the commotion, walked over. She looked puzzled at first but smiled brightly when she saw my grandmother. Oh, Margaret, you came today. She greeted my grandmother warmly. Steve and I both had question marks floating above our heads. Yes, my grandson invited me. I thought it might not be appropriate for someone from an older generation. But I couldn't refuse my grandson's invitation. My grandmother returned Michelle's smile with one of her own. Seeing them talk so familiarly, I tilted my head in confusion. How do you know Michelle, Grandma? I asked, and Michelle answered instead. You didn't know? She is the wife of the company's founder, Robert, and the second president. What? Wait, what? I was shocked by Michelle's words, but Steve was even more stunned. The former president? He seemed to sober up instantly, his previously flushed face turning pale. My grandmother stepped closer to him. So, you were saying something about my failed upbringing. Would you care to explain? She asked with a piercing gaze. Steve stammered under her intense look. You spoke without knowing anything. Apologize for your behavior, Michelle added, giving him a cold stare. Answer my question properly. And you were quite rude. Even when your wife tried to stop you, you continued to make others uncomfortable. What were you thinking? My grandmother, showing an expression I'd never seen before, sternly reprimanded Steve. All I could do was watch in silence. After giving him a thorough dressing down, my grandmother sighed. I'll leave your fate to Michelle. If I were still president, you wouldn't be able to work in this industry again, she said coldly. I deeply apologize. I'm truly sorry. Both Steve and his wife apologized profusely, with tears streaming down their faces. Seeing his wife in such a state, I felt a bit sorry for her, but no one stepped in to defend Steve. In the end, Steve was fired shortly after. His remarks to the former president were deemed too disrespectful, and Michelle's husband, the current president, was furious. He had said, if anyone stands up for you, maybe I'll consider just a demotion as an act of mercy. But I thought, honestly, President Brown was being too kind. Steve was already disliked by everyone. No one was going to defend him. He asked me to back him up. I just refused. I refused too. People might want to sue him, but no one wants to protect him. Just as expected, no one stood up for Steve. Instead, it was as if they were avenging their past grievances. He has done this to us, they said, one after another. Some employees even threatened to quit if he wasn't fired. So, President Brown decided to fire Steve after listening to the employees. I heard his wife left him too. Rumor had it that his wife left him. Well, she seemed like a sensible person, so it was no surprise she didn't want to stay with him. So, what's Steve doing now? He's working day-to-day jobs, just scraping by. According to a senior colleague, someone spotted Steve doing traffic control. Steve even reached out to former colleagues asking for help. But everyone ignored him and blocked his number. I just hope he's not causing trouble for his new co-workers. I muttered, then got back to work. By the way, what did Grandma mean by what she said? I wondered after the anniversary party ended. Why didn't you tell me? I asked my grandmother. I was as surprised as anyone to learn she was the former president. Honestly, Alex, I was surprised when you said you joined the company. I thought about telling you. But I worried my words might pressure you unnecessarily. My grandmother answered. I tilted my head, wondering what kind of pressure she meant. But since she chose not to explain further, I didn't press the issue. Well, I guess I'll just keep working as myself. That was my plan, but reality had other ideas. Hey, Alex. I heard you're Margaret's grandson. Ah, yeah, I am. If you've got her blood, you'll be fine. It seems the incident revealed to everyone that my grandmother was the former president. As a result, my colleagues started talking to me more and assigning me tasks for unclear reasons. But one thing kept nagging at me. They're all seeing me as the former president's grandson. I appreciated being given responsibilities. But I couldn't shake the feeling it was because of my connection to the former president. Where I used to be seen as just another employee, now things were different. Once I realized this, I started feeling trapped. It feels like I'm adjusting to everyone else rather than being myself. I began holding back on my opinions and actions, trying to be the grandson whom my grandmother would be proud of. Alex, you've really improved lately. Thank you. As a result, that's how I came to be seen. My efforts to maintain my grandmother's reputation were well received by my superiors. But inside, I felt unsatisfied. That's why you look so tired, Alex. I confided my feelings to Lisa. Since learning about my grandmother, my relationships with my peers had become strained. They were probably cautious because of my connection to the former president. But Lisa, who continued to talk to me like before, was a great comfort. Honestly, it's hard to approach you now, and working with you has become difficult. She explained that the presence of senior employees around me made others hesitant to approach. Also, I used to be vocal with my ideas, but now I was more of a mediator. Some of our peers, who were influenced by me, found it affecting their work. I don't think this is like you. Some of our peers are wary of you now, worried that if you notice them, the bosses will too. I sighed at her words. Alex, I'd like you to lead the next project. Yes, sure. By this time, I was often chosen as a project leader. I led many projects. If it's Alex, it'll be fine. Yeah, he's Margaret's grandson, after all. That being said, it wasn't my voluntary decision to participate, it was largely due to recommendations from others. They seemed to think, if he's the grandson of the predecessor, it should be fine to entrust him with it. While I appreciated the trust, it was all because I was the former president's grandson. So, although I used to enjoy my work, it had become more complicated lately. One day, during a meeting, Alex, what do you think? I was asked for my opinion and paused for a moment. I instinctively wanted to share my thoughts, but I didn't want to disrupt the progress that had been made. I think you should choose whatever option works best for everyone. As a result, I gave a safe answer. Got it. Everyone smiled and agreed. And I quietly breathed a sigh of relief. Alex. I didn't notice Lisa's concerned look. A few days later. Alex, can I have a word? Michelle called me in. I hadn't caused any issues like the one with Steve, and the projects were progressing smoothly. So I was puzzled about why I was being called in. Your work attitude lately hasn't been great, Michelle said when I arrived. I was stunned, unable to process her words for a few seconds. My work attitude? I haven't disrupted team harmony. That's the problem. I immediately protested, but she firmly shut me down. This company values individuality. Even Steve could do that. When did you become such a yes man? Her words hit me hard. I realized that I had been giving safe, generic responses lately, like, if everyone agrees, that's fine. You understand now, don't you? We understand your position, but think more for the future. I nodded at Michelle's words. Reflecting on her advice, I went home. How was your day? Hi, Grandma. I wonder if I did something unnecessary. My grandmother greeted me and immediately sensed my inner turmoil. Just from that, she seemed to realize I was troubled. I gave a wry smile, knowing I could never hide anything from my grandmother. Grandma, can we talk? I shared with her what Michelle had said, how I felt seen as the former president's grandson, and my struggle to live up to that. My grandmother listened to me without interrupting, nodding along as I spoke. When I finished, she gave a troubled smile. Just as I thought. You're being crushed by this strange pressure. But remember, you are my grandson, and that won't change. However, you and I are different people. Instead of acting for my sake, you should do what you want and show your own colors. Her calm voice and the way she held my hand reassured me. She never blamed me, her gentle, instructive way of speaking always resonated with me. You'll be more liked as yourself than as a yes man. That's more like my grandson. I understood what she meant. Trying to maintain her reputation by watching others' reactions wasn't the right approach. Being true to myself would honor her more. Hey, I'm back. Oh, you're home, bro. Just then, Matt returned. In his hand, he held a thick stack of documents. Yeah, I got home early today. How's your studying going? Pretty good. It's my lifelong dream, so I don't mind the studying. Matt's dream was to become a lawyer. Since childhood, he dreamed of being a hero, eventually aiming to be a lawyer who helps others like a hero. By the way, I actually wanted to talk to you about something. What's up? Grandma told me about some trouble you had. Could you tell me about it? I'd like to use it as a simulation for handling such situations as a lawyer. Seeing Matt's eager expression, I chuckled but agreed. As long as I can keep it within what I can share. Since then, with the advice from Michelle and Grandma, I started speaking up more in meetings. I think this plan is the best option. But this plan offers. Of course, there were disagreements with other employees. However, I found these discussions enjoyable. Working with you now is a lot of fun, Alex. Lisa's words made my day. The projects I participated in began to succeed one after another. That's the grandson of the former president for you. Because of this, I heard that comment more frequently. You look happier these days. During dinner, my father noticed. Really? I replied. Yeah, you seemed really stressed out before. Now you seem more relaxed, he said, looking relieved. It seemed I had caused him quite a bit of worry. Yeah, I'm enjoying work again. That's good to hear. When I started acting like myself again, everyone seemed surprised. But my peers were the first to accept me, which made everyone else follow suit. Because of this, I was able to enjoy my work once more. Both Grandma and I are always on your side. So go ahead and act how you want. I nodded with a smile at my father's words. Expressing oneself can be challenging in today's world. Especially within an organization where the group often takes precedence over the individual. However, it's important to find a place where you can shine without losing yourself. Alex, you've really been looking great lately. One day, Lisa said this to me. Thanks, I replied, looking at her. When I was feeling pressured and losing myself, she continued to talk to me as usual. Before I realized it, I had developed feelings for her. But there was something holding me back. Hey, Lisa, can I ask you something? If it's something I can answer. Who was the guy you brought to the anniversary party? At the anniversary party, Lisa had brought a man with her. Curious about him, I hadn't been able to confess my feelings to her. Oh, him? He's my brother. It turned out she had brought her brother to the party. I don't have a boyfriend, so I asked my brother to pretend to be one. She said this, looking a bit embarrassed. Feeling a surge of affection, I confessed my feelings to her without thinking. "If you'd like, would you go out with me?" "What?" Lisa blushed at my words. But she quickly nodded. I was overjoyed. I decided that from now on, I would live true to myself, together with her. "I like how you're so kind, Mike. I like how you're so lovely too, Emily." As we listed each other's good points, it almost felt like a confession. Her fair skin turned red. Seeing her like that made me blush too. But maybe it was only natural that we were drawn to each other. Because encountering at that place was the beginning of everything. I'm Mike. A 30-year-old single guy working in sales at a mid-sized company. Though busy, my job is fulfilling. It's a good place to work, except for one thing, my boss, Tom. Tom is very demanding and has a completely different approach to work than I do. Once, we clashed over how to handle a customer. Tom, who values efficiency, criticized my approach of prioritizing thoroughness. It was wrong of me to talk back, but ever since then, Tom hasn't thought well of me and has been spreading rumors he is incompetent. Thankfully, Tom is the only one who thinks that. Since then, I've kept a polite distance, accepting his instructions while finding ways to deal with him. But I clashed with Tom again recently. One morning, as I was heading to work, I heard several screams as I was about to go up the stairs to the train platform. Someone near the top had tripped and fallen. It happened right in front of me. About 5 people tumbled down the stairs, and I rushed to help. Others were also trying to help the fallen, calling out, "Get a station attendant." I asked a woman who had fallen near me, "Are you okay?" She was at the bottom, but those on top of her quickly moved, so she managed to get free. However, she had scraped her arms and legs and looked in pain. I offered her my shoulder and helped her to a nearby bench. Her belongings were scattered, so I quickly gathered them up. That was all I could do, but paramedics soon arrived, and I told them about her injuries. Having witnessed the accident, I was questioned by the police and reported what I had seen. I was about to leave, but I noticed the woman I had helped was still shaking from the pain and the shock of the accident. I looked over to where the paramedics were and saw that her treatment seemed to be finished. "Are you okay?" I asked, and she thanked me, smiling as she said her injuries were just minor scrapes. I was relieved. However, when I glanced at my watch, I was shocked. I was already late for work. I quickly ended my conversation with the woman and hurriedly called the office. Tom answered the phone. I reported the accident at the station on my way to work. I apologized for the late notice and told him I was heading to the office now. But Tom sneered, "You probably just overslept, right?" I explained that it wasn't a lie, but Tom didn't believe me, saying, "There's no way such an accident could happen. If you didn't oversleep, then were you slacking off? You're useless. Don't ever come in." He hung up on me. I couldn't help but say wow out loud. As I looked up at the sky, I heard, "Are you okay?" I turned to see the woman from earlier. Tom's loud voice had carried through my phone. She seemed to have overheard bits of our conversation. "Is this my fault?" she asked, looking worried. "No, it's not just because of today," I reassured her. I meant to reassure her, but my smile came out weak. Knowing my rocky relationship with Tom, I could already imagine the lecture I'd get if I went to the office now. I've had enough of this. Despite Tom's harsh words, I decided I should still show up at work. But I really didn't feel like it. For now, I decided to leave with the woman. She mentioned waiting for a pickup at the Rotary. However, she seemed to be in pain carrying her bag. With her permission, I carried her heavy bag for her. On our way to the Rotary, we made small talk about how it was fortunate her injuries weren't severe. Her ride arrived quickly, and to my surprise, it was a luxury car. I watched in amazement as the driver gracefully placed her luggage in the trunk. Wow, is she someone important? I wondered if I had been disrespectful in any way. I would have treated anyone the same, but seeing such an expensive car made me a bit nervous. The driver and the woman both thanked me politely. She seemed relieved, giving me a cute smile. She even offered to give me a ride home, but I had decided to face the office. She then offered to drop me at work, but I insisted the office was just a short train ride away. I thanked her for her kindness and said goodbye. Heading to the platform. My heart was still racing from the unusual morning. I took a deep breath to calm myself. Phew, I'm glad I could respond quickly. As I steadied my breathing, a memory from my childhood resurfaced. When I was a kid, I once saw a child, whom I often saw at the park but didn't know well, fall from a playground structure. I froze, unable to do anything, as the child cried in pain. Just then, my grandmother, returning from shopping, passed by and helped the child. She hurried over, checked the child's injuries, and made sure there were no other wounds. At the park's fountain, she washed the dirt from the wounds and lightly bandaged them with a clean handkerchief. She treated the unknown child just like she would her own grandchild, then carried the child home on her back. Meanwhile, I couldn't even say, "Are you okay?" After helping the child, she returned to the park with me. "Just leave the shopping bags around here," she said as she put them down to carry the child. Now the fresh groceries inside were spoiled. And some eggs had broken from being put down too roughly. "It's all ruined," I told my grandmother. She smiled and said, "As long as the child got home safely with just a few scrapes, that's what matters." Seeing her expression and hearing her words, I felt embarrassed, realizing I was worrying over nothing even though I hadn't done anything myself. It was around then that I started to notice. My grandmother and mother would always rush to help people in need, whether on the street or neighbors with problems, putting their own needs second. Even though I grew up seeing this, I developed a different mindset in my teenage years. I started evaluating everything based on gain and loss. The trigger was a friend's frequent saying, "What's the point?" During those rebellious teenage years, I was constantly trying to look cool. I became overly sharp and prickly. I began to apply that gain and loss perspective to my grandmother's and mother's actions. Stop worrying about others and take care of things at home. I lashed out with harsh words during my rebellious phase. But one day, I realized that frustration was directed at myself. A classmate who couldn't find their eraser. A student searching for something. For a moment, I thought I should help, but I never had the courage to speak up, feeling embarrassed about seeming too eager to be good. When I was feeling troubled by these thoughts, we were out with my grandmother and mother when someone in front of us suddenly collapsed. My grandmother and mother immediately took action, while I stood frozen. "Go get someone from the store," my mother shouted, finally prompting me to move. However, I couldn't explain the situation well to the store clerk. The moment quickly passed by and I felt pathetic. That night, I asked my grandmother and mother how they could always act so quickly. They said, "If you were in that situation, wouldn't you be grateful for help and a kind word?" They casually mentioned that lost time can always be made up. For them, helping others was simply a given. I felt a deep shame for always standing back, thinking someone else would handle it. Not long after, I noticed a classmate in need. "Want to use mine?" I tried to say it casually, but my heart was pounding. "Thank you. You saved me." Seeing the happy smile on that kid's face, I felt relieved. Once I actually did it, it didn't seem so uncool. I felt embarrassed about my previous attitude of always asking, "What's the point?" From then on, I gradually became more proactive, leading up to today. Perhaps because today had been quite eventful, memories of those times came flooding back. Thinking back, I realized I had handled things more smoothly today, and I gave myself a little pat on the back. As I was thinking about all this, I arrived at work. Hurrying to my department, I ran into my boss, John. "Sorry, I'm late." I apologized. John, unaware of the situation, asked, "What's going on at this hour?" I honestly explained what had happened on my way to work and mentioned that I had informed Tom about my delay. Heading to the department now, I knew there would be trouble. I also reported that Tom had told me not to come in. Tom again. John sighed. Tom was a point of frustration for John as well. We exchanged knowing smiles, and John patted my back, telling me to get on with my work as he walked with me to the department. As we entered, Tom glared and clicked his tongue. He looked like he wanted to say something, but John intervened and called out, "Tom," which prevented any further issues. I managed to start my regular tasks. But from that day on, I began considering a job change. It wasn't just because of the incident and the tardiness, but it was one of the factors. The current company rarely transfers employees. I would have to continue dealing with Tom indefinitely. While working hard to improve my skills and proving myself to Tom was an option. I thought it might be better to move to a place where I could better utilize my abilities, rather than wasting energy on just one person. Turning 30 felt like a good milestone. I decided to take the plunge and switch jobs. Finding a job with good conditions seemed challenging, but I successfully secured a position at a company I decided on. I chose a sales role, just like my previous job. On my first day at the new job, it was hard to greet everyone in the large department, so I greeted those around my seat and sat down. As I glanced up, I made eye contact with a woman sitting a bit further away. She smiled and greeted me lightly, and I widened my eyes in recognition. "Oh, it's her." I almost said it out loud. It was the woman I had met at the train station accident 3 months ago. I immediately stood up and walked towards her seat. At the same time, she got up, and we met halfway. "Thank you so much back then." "No problem at all. But how come you're here?" We both had questions for each other and couldn't help but laugh. Her name was Emily Smith. She's only 25 and still quite young. In the sales department, she was working as an assistant. I briefly explained my job change as a move to improve my skills. Even though we were in the same department, I only occasionally ran into Emily in the break room while getting coffee and had short conversations with her. Still, I often saw her from my desk, noticing her work habits. Emily was always the most efficient worker. What impressed me the most was her keen observation. If she saw that the files and materials on the shelves were disorganized, she would quickly tidy them up. If she noticed trash on the floor, she would promptly pick it up. She would approach visitors in the lobby with a smile if they seemed lost, and she would help those carrying heavy loads. Seeing her take action first and doing everything naturally, I began to respect her a lot. As I watched her more, I started to develop feelings for her. When we first met, I only saw her as someone to help, but now I noticed how fair-skinned she was and how lovely her smile was. Her dedication to her job stood out among the younger employees. I began to see her as both a colleague and an interesting woman. One day after work, while waiting for the train on the platform, I heard a woman's voice saying, "Are you okay?" Looking in that direction, I saw a man in a suit crouching down, looking unwell. My feet naturally moved toward them. When I finally reached him, a woman was already there, offering her support. To my surprise, it was Emily. Together, we helped the man to a bench. Someone else called for station staff, and the man was taken to the first aid room. After everything settled, Emily and I exchanged glances. "This reminds me of another time," she said. "Yes, it's like a continuation from before. But today, we were the ones helping," she said, rubbing her arm where she was injured that day. "It was really painful and scary, but I was so grateful when you spoke to me right away." "Thank you for that." Emily vividly remembered that day and expressed her gratitude. She also mentioned how well I had handled the situation. "Mike, you asked before doing anything, right? Even when you took my hand or touched me, you were considerate because I'm a woman. And when you helped me to a safe place, you spread a handkerchief so my clothes wouldn't get dirty. You even offered me your water bottle. You called the paramedics immediately when they arrived. You noticed I was trembling and reassured me that everything was okay multiple times." Hearing her recount my actions made me feel a bit embarrassed since I hadn't realized what I was doing at the time. Being able to do such things naturally is wonderful. "I really like you for being so kind, Mike." Hearing her say this while looking into my eyes made me feel a little flustered. "Well, Emily, you too," I stammered. There were countless things I could praise about her. Even today, because Emily noticed the man immediately, he avoided a worse situation. Her natural kindness was always evident. When I told her this, Emily blushed. "That's why I like you, Emily," I said. Realizing how that sounded, I felt embarrassed and muttered, "Oh." It felt like a confession. Seeing Emily's face, her cheeks were slightly red. Pressing her cheeks with her hands, Emily asked shyly, "Does this mean I confessed first?" But this was the turning point where we realized our mutual feelings and started dating. We dated for 3 years before getting married. We could have tied the knot earlier, but we decided to wait until Emily's work settled down. However, there was a surprising episode behind this decision. Emily and I were in the sales department together. But a few months into our relationship, she was transferred to another department. She got promoted to the strategic planning department. I was surprised by the sudden advancement, and Emily hesitantly opened up, saying, "Well, actually." I let out a sound of surprise like never before. It turned out Emily was the granddaughter of the company president. Before I joined the company, she had been gaining experience by rotating through various departments. Her tenure in the sales department had ended, and she was moving on to her next assignment. Incidentally, the president's last name is also Smith. Though it might sound rude to say it's a common last name. I never realized Emily was the president's granddaughter because she never gave off that aura. In hindsight, the luxury car I saw when we first met should have been a clue. But Emily lived alone in a small apartment and wasn't picked up or dropped off in a fancy car. Emily flashed a playful smile and said, "I never got around to telling you, but her humble behavior, despite her impressive background, made me respect her even more." Speaking of surprises, there's another story. It was when I introduced Emily to my grandmother and parents. I brought Emily to my family's home. My grandmother and Emily saw each other and exclaimed, "Oh," and then burst into laughter. Well. Mike, this is the third time I've met this young lady." "What? You're Mike's grandmother?" Curious, I asked what was going on, and it turned out my grandmother and Emily first met about a year ago. My grandmother had gone out alone and ended up buying a lot of souvenirs. While waiting in line for the elevator at the station, the bags she was carrying were in the way. She let families and groups go ahead of her. At that time, Emily was waiting for a friend and could see the elevator. After a while, seeing my grandmother still standing there with her bags, Emily approached her and said, "Let's take the next one together." At that time, Emily offered to carry my grandmother's bags, saying, "I'll take those for you," and helped her to the taxi stand. About 6 months later, Emily was out at a festival near the station with a friend, wearing a dress. In the crowd, the ribbon on Emily's dress got messed up. Her friend tried to fix it but couldn't manage. My grandmother, also at the festival with friends, saw Emily struggling and offered to help. After fixing the ribbon, they recognized each other from their previous encounter. My grandmother said, "I finally repaid your kindness," and went on her way. This was their third encounter. My grandmother joked, "Maybe it's me who's fated to be with Emily, not you, Mike," which made everyone laugh. Coincidentally, both the place where Emily and I met and where my grandmother and Emily met was the same station. That station seemed to have something that brought people together. In our family, we call that station the matchmaking station. It's quite mysterious. Somehow, kindness upon kindness linked into a connection. And that connection transformed into happiness, bringing smiles to our